Welcome, everybody. It's July the 10th, 2026. It's episode number 101. And what an epic guest we have tonight. We've got John Lentini. And I can't think of too many people that have more expertise than this guy in the world of fire investigations. So what a treat. I really appreciate him being here. He's one of just a few in the world that have the qualifications that he has. And I have no doubt that you're going to be entertained tonight with this specific guest. I want to say hello to everybody that's joining us. I see my aunt's in the house. JP, welcome. Objection OR. I don't know that I've seen you in here or not. If I have, then forgive me. Steph is in the house. Brett's fave. And many, many others of the regulars. I appreciate you guys being in here from all over this country. And some of you from Canada, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's not some from Europe as well. So I appreciate you all being here. Thank you for being here, Phyllis and Steph, Darren, and the list goes on and on. Karen, I love it. You guys spend your Friday evenings with me, and I appreciate that very much. Remember, if you're just joining me tonight, remember to follow my YouTube page. It's Detective Jason White. And you can catch me there, and you can follow me there. No, you can also follow me on my Detective Jason White Facebook page. And Boulder City, Nevada. Excellent. Sun Lover, I know you've been here many times. I appreciate you being here. And by the way, I might actually be speaking in Vegas. So I'll have to let you know if that happens. Some casino down there is interested, so we'll see. I'm loving it. It's super hot outside. I think the heat index today was 106. I felt like a melted popsicle out there. And I'm glad to be home, and it was a really, really busy week this week. So this guest, I don't want to waste any of his time. You talk about epic. I've seen this guy on TV over the years, and I just didn't really know him at the time, but I was very impressed. John Lentini has been at the center of most of the important developments in fire investigation since 1990. He began his career at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Crime Laboratory in 1974. Way before most of you were born, and that's what he was doing. There he learned criminalistics in general and fire debris analysis in particular, and received an introduction to fire scene investigation. He went into private practice in 1977 and spent the next 15 years working 100 to 150 fire scenes per year, mostly for insurance companies that had doubts about the legitimacy of their insured and fire losses. At the same time, he managed a fire debris analysis laboratory with a nationwide clientele. He has been at the center of the standardization of both laboratory and field investigations of fires, and as co-chair of the International Association of Arson Investigators with the Forensic Science Committee. He was the principal author of the first laboratory standards published by the IAAI in 1988. He oversaw the acceptance of those standards by this committee, or the STM Committee E30 on forensic science, and this is used by every competent fire debris laboratory in the U.S. today. And we're going to get into that because he's actually pointed out every competent. When the American Board of Criminalistics, also known as ABC, was incorporated in 1993, he was the first civilian elected to the ABC Board of Directors. He served 2 terms on the board and was a co-author of the examination for the certification of fire debris analysis. I'll let him talk further on his background because that gives you a taste. Just to let you know that Mr. Lentini has personally conducted more than 2,000 fire scene inspections and has been accepted as an expert witness on more than 200 occasions. He is a frequently invited speaker on the subject of the standard of care in fire investigation and laboratory analysis of fire debris, as well as The Progress of Standardization in Fire Sciences, or Forensic Sciences, rather. His textbook, which we'll talk more about this in a little bit, Scientific Protocols for Fire Investigation, is now in its 3rd edition. And his case study book, which is called Twice Burned, contains lessons for anyone interested in fires. Both books are available on Amazon, and we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about his website where he can be reached, etc. Let's bring on the legend, fire legend, John Lentini. You are, sir. You're one of a very, very small group of people, and I got to tell you, I'm a little scared to be here with you because I'm going to feel like a moron because I don't know a lot about fire investigation, but I'm fascinated by it. And thank you for being here, sir.
Glad to be here. Just watch the legend talk. My wife gets upset when people start calling me a legend. We're going to have to put another room on the house for my ego.
Yeah. Well, how did you end up getting involved in, I mean, you started out with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, but what was it that made you really interested in getting involved in this type of work?
Well, I started out as a generalist, criminalist, and they taught me to do microscopic hair comparison. And after 6 weeks of training on the microscope, I went to the boss and I said, you know, boss, I don't really feel comfortable doing this. One pubic hair looks a lot like the next one to me. And I don't want to be, sending people to prison based on my bad skills, my non-existent skills in hair comparison. And they took it very well. They said, maybe you'd like to do the arson. And nobody else wanted to do it. In those days, it was smelly and messy, and you had to wash a lot of glassware. But they brought me into the room and showed me how arson analysis was done. It's not really, it's fire debris analysis. It's not arson until somebody says it's arson. But anyways, I looked at it and it was classical chemistry. And I had training in classical chemistry. I could understand it. I could explain it. And I learned it pretty quickly. And before long, I was the go-to guy in Georgia for fire debris analysis. So that's when I met a lot of fire marshals. They would bring me samples, and our techniques in those days were not very sensitive. So I probably put out a lot of false negatives, and they were yelling at me and saying, damn it, John, I know there's something in here. And I say, well, if you knew there was something in there, what you need me for? That was because I was a 22-year-old smartass at the time. And they said, you know what, smartass, come out to the fire scene with us, and you show us how to find the stuff. And I quickly learned that these poor guys were overwhelmed. They were getting like 10 assignments a week. And so they were doing something a little bit more than a windshield job, but not much more than a windshield job. And I quickly figured out that if you want to find gasoline that somebody poured on the floor, you have to shovel the floor. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have the time to do that. So I got into insurance work, mainly looking at suspicious claims. And people knew when I had been to a fire scene, because when I was done with that scene, you could eat off it. I would shovel and shovel and shovel until I figured it out.
Yeah, you really didn't have any textbooks really was there any textbooks that dealt with arson investigation?
There was one textbook. It was called Kirk's Fire Investigation, and it was a little orange thing that was printed in 1969, and it had some good ideas in it, but it also had a lot of misinformation in it. Paul Kirk wrote it. He was one of the premier forensic scientists of the 20th century, but he bought into some of the myths. Like he thought that you go into a scene and you find out what metals are melted, and then you can tell what temperature the fire achieved. And that if it achieved an especially high temperature, like enough to melt copper, that would tell you something. Well, we learned later, and not much later, but sometime in the 80s, we learned that a well-ventilated wood fire will burn at the same temperature as a gasoline fire. One of my first experiences running a weekend seminar for the local IAAI, we had 2 rooms that we set on fire, and measured the temperature with a multi-channel thermocouple device that I owned because I was in a laboratory. We set one room on fire with newspaper and one room on fire with gasoline. And the temperature reading in the newspaper room was higher. And people said, John, you must have mixed up the wires. You must have got your wires crossed. We double checked it and nope. And
Why is that? Why is that?
It's because the temperature of a fire is controlled by how much oxygen it has. If a blacksmith wants to increase the temperature in his forge, he doesn't change his fuel. He blows air on it.
Okay.
And blacksmiths have known that for millennia, but fire investigators, including myself, used to think that if it was accelerated, it had to be hotter. So I would go looking for melted bed springs because I'd say, well, if a bed spring is melted, that means it got really hot. And if there's 2 melted bed springs, wow, this is a really hot fire. Mm-hmm. And it actually meant nothing. I did a lot of fires out in the boondocks that never got any water put on them. And in those cases, I was looking for temperatures, see if there was hot temperatures. About the only thing you can do with a fire like that is inventory. Catch somebody, like they take their guns out and then people say, oh, my guns must have burned up. Well, that doesn't happen. So I caught a lot of bad guys back in those days doing things like that.
Yeah, and you've actually you've really done a lot of work in basically. I didn't even want to say, exonerating people. I'd rather say finding the truth. And so that's what I kind of wanted to get into a little bit, with respect to what's, really, we'll get to that in a minute, but what's the basics of really, kind of the cornerstone of a good fire investigator, somebody, that wants to get into this, and what's your advice being somebody like yourself that you see probably a common problem with respect to some of these guys that are out there? I mean, you've ran across a lot of stuff that I know that you've shaken your head over many times over. What do you think is probably something that you look for in a really good investigator today?
Somebody who's been to a lot of fires. That's my best advice for a fire investigator. Join a task force, go to as many fires as you can and see as many different kinds of fires. If you've never seen arc tracking that caused a fire, you're not going to think about it. You're not going to hypothesize, oh, this could be an arc tracking fire. Because if you don't see a lot of them, and I've only seen, a couple of dozen arc tracking fires out of the 2,000 I've looked at. But as you work more fires, you get to see more different types of things that can cause fires. So that's number one, is just volume. Go to a lot of fires. The second advice I have is set something on fire. Set fires and watch them. Now, every time I've set a fire, in a test experiment, I learned something. Sometimes I'm really surprised. There was one particular fire in Jacksonville, Florida in 1991, where I was retained by the prosecutor to help them send this guy that they thought had killed 6 people by lighting a fire. And I was there and I looked at the room and I had a colleague with me and we both agreed that it would take 15 or 20 minutes for that room to flash over. So we set it on fire, basically trying to simulate a kid playing with matches and lighting a sofa on fire. That fire went to flash over in 4 minutes. I was just shocked. And not only did it go to flash over in 4 minutes, but it made patterns on the floor, made a V pattern in the doorway, and it looked just like the place where they thought the guy had set the fire. And so it was called the Lime Street Fire.
Okay. Yeah, I think I remember hearing about that.
It's on Wikipedia page.
Okay.
You can go look it up.
Let's I'm gonna just kind of show the viewers what I remember watching this, and if I remember correctly, this may have been on 2020. Amanda, show this video, those videos I told you about. Start with part 1.
This bunker has been set up with rooms of ordinary furniture. In a moment, a fire will be set.
The living room portion is what we're actually going to burn.
Not with gasoline like an arsonist might use, but with just a spark, as if from a burning cigarette.
We're just hoping to generate some of the artifacts that people have in the past called evidence of arson.
Investigators begin their fire experiments. The tiny couch fire grows steadily. A layer of hot, dense smoke forms on the ceiling. These thermal images show how hot it is. Red indicates a temperature of nearly 1,200 degrees. Soon, the blazing hot gas starts to descend. Suddenly, just a few minutes after touching off the fire, those hot gases ignite, and the room explodes.
Everything is red.
This is a phenomenon known as flashover.
Flashover is a transition point where you go from having a fire in a room to a room on fire.
We're going to show part 2 of that because it's just another minute or two of what you're talking about. But I think I remember, was that 2020? Because I remember watching
It was. I got a call from the producer who said he wanted to do a show about bad arson cases, miscarriages of justice. And
Yeah.
I told him about this case in Pennsylvania called Hantak Lee that I had worked on for 21 years before it was all over. And he says to me, "Oh, we know that case. We don't want to cover that. Mr. Lee was not very photogenic. His English was bad." And I said, "I know what you want. You want a case with a pretty white woman, don't you?" And he said, "Do you know any?" And I put him on to 2 cases, one out of Louisiana and one out of Indiana, that were relatively current.
Yeah, I think a man is pulling up part 2. I want to see the part 2 of it because it really kind of segues. I remember this on TV back in the day. When did that air? Do you remember?
It first aired in 2010, and then they reran it in 2011.
Okay. Yeah, so flash over, everything kind of hits that point of temperature where just the whole room ignites. Is that kind of the basics of it?
That's the basis of it, and what that allows is for radiation that's produced by the fire to move in every direction, including downward. That's how you get the floor burned. And you know, when I first got into business, low burns meant that it was the fire must have had help in the form of an accelerant. It's not true. Once you get the flashover, you're going to have burning on the floor. That's just part of the deal.
Mhm.
Now, you know, if you get it put out before flashover and there's a trail on the floor, sure, you can call it with your eyeballs. But once flashover has happened, the floor is going to burn, and people are going to be suspicious of it. Now, people that don't know any better, at least, are going to be suspicious of that.
Yeah, and I would think that in part, some of the burn patterns that are initially there because of that flashover, that's going to affect what your original patterns would have been to begin with. Forgive me if I'm
Sure, and very often it'll destroy them to where they're not there to see anymore. But the other thing that happens during flashover that a lot of people didn't understand until the last 10 or 15 years is that fire uses up all the oxygen in the room, and it starts to go out. It'll stop flaming. The materials in the room will continue to pyrolyze and make fuel, but the fire will be happening only at the windows or at the doorway. And this will mess people up that are trying to find the origin of the fire, because the fire that starts away from a window and goes to flashover might end up having much more serious damage over by the window where the oxygen is. And people will call the wrong origin. And I have seen that on so many occasions, where people, they see a V pattern next to a window and they say, that's the origin. And I look at it and say, that's ventilation. And this is something that people need to think about when they're doing fire investigations, is where's the ventilation? Because if you don't understand the ventilation, you're not going to understand that fire.
Amanda, show part 2 of that video real quick.
But what you see after a fire has exploded into flashover is even more important to our story. As Mr. Lentini begins showing us through the ruins, keep these 2 phrases in mind. Burn patterns like the letter V.
And it comes up.
Yep.
Comes along here. And all the way to the ceiling.
Now that's a V pattern.
That's a V pattern.
and multiple points of
You're going
origin.
to see that white pattern on the wall. And then look behind you.
Both have often been used as slam dunk evidence of arson, but that's not always true.
Show me a couple things in this room that could indicate to someone arson.
Well, if you see a pattern on the couch that looks like it's where it started because there's a V over there, then you see another V over here, you say, well, that could be 2 points of origin.
2 points of origin, multiple points of origin. That's the key.
That's
one of the keys in the
that's a
in the
slam
bun-
dunk.
Amazing stuff. And it's a dirty job. And you got to be willing to jump in there. Let's talk about some of the other myths that go along with the fire investigation that you kind of have debunked, so to speak, or not only you, but other people of your stature that have actually debunked, but it's maybe even still kind of common practice today.
Well, we've managed to get rid of most of the myths, but there were a lot of them around. The first one that I took on was crazed glass. And that was written up in textbooks that crazed glass, very good, crazed glass meant rapid heating of the glass. And rapid heating was then equivalent to an accelerated fire. Well, it turns out that glass doesn't craze when it's heated. It crazes when it gets hot and then gets rapidly cooled. So it's the extinguishment water that causes the glass to craze. And that means crazed glass is absolutely useless in telling you anything about a fire other than the glass got hot and the glass got cold. But it took me several editions of working on the NFPA 921 committee to get the committee to actually come out and say, crazed glass means rapid cooling, and it's not going to help you. There's other myths where, like spalled concrete. People used to think that if the concrete was spalled, that is an explosive chipping up of the surface, that there must have been a flammable liquid on that concrete. And that is wrong on so many levels. Number one, nobody can reproduce it. Number two, as long as it's a liquid on the surface of the concrete, it cannot be above its own boiling point. So you're talking 500-600 degrees maximum. But if you take a stack of oak pallets, you take 3 oak pallets, you light them on fire on a concrete slab, you will cause spalling all the time. But nobody that I know has ever made concrete spall by pouring gasoline on it and lighting it on fire. The problem is that the gasoline, any flammable liquid, doesn't last long enough to cause significant damage. It doesn't last long enough to burn a hole in the floor or to go through like two levels of floor tile, vinyl tile. Mm-hmm. You look down and you see the tile is burned completely through. And in the Cameron Todd Willingham case, they looked and they saw the burned tiles, and they said, "Oh yeah, that's where he poured the accelerant." It's not possible. You can't do it. And there's been research done in 2012 is when it was finally published, where it came out and said, "Look, it's just impossible for a flammable liquid to burn a hole in a floor."
You had talked I've seen you talking about just incompetence, and I appreciated your candor with respect to that. Can you kind of touch upon that a little bit with some of the incompetence that you've kind of encountered or things? I of course you're not calling anybody out specifically, but you know what I'm saying? Well,
when you get into trial, you have to call them out specifically. And I didn't make a lot of friends that way. And people were in denial. When NFPA 921 first came out and we said, look, shiny alligators don't mean anything. Well, if you've sent someone to prison based on shiny alligators on the floor, you got two choices. You can say, oh my God, I have made a terrible mistake. Or you can just be in denial and say, Lentini is full of it. Of course, flammable liquids can cause shiny alligators on the floor. But that's gone away pretty much. Most of the people that believed in shiny alligators and spalled concrete have either retired or died.
Hey, tell me about what is shiny alligators specifically?
Well, when a piece of wood burns, it develops char blisters, and those char blisters look like the scales on an alligator's back. Unless you're in Great Britain and they call it crocodiling over there. But it's this set of little squares that when the wood burns, it's just charred wood. And people were giving it meaning beyond what was real. They said, well, if you have large, shiny alligator blisters, that means rapid heating. And if you have dull, flat blisters, that means slow heating. And of course, a lot of people, they say, well, I can rule out a cigarette because this fire burned too fast. Cigarette fires are slow. So I'm ruling out cigarettes. I'm ruling out electrical because electrical fires are slow. But the fact is that no matter how a fire starts, once it gets to flashover, it's fast. And it's very impressive. A lot of people have never seen it. There you go. There is some shiny alligator blisters. It's just charred wood. And all it means is that the wood caught fire. And in 1983, the second edition of Kirk's fire investigation came out, and John DeHaan published a photograph taken by a fire investigator from Nevada called Monty McGill. And he had a picture of a wall that had flat blisters, it had shiny blisters, it had big blisters, it had little blisters, all from the same fire. And that should have disproved it right away, but people still were going on with shiny alligators well into the 90s. And there may still be some people that think about that.
Let's talk a little bit about how you got involved in the Innocence Project, because I think that's really an amazing thing that you've been able to get involved in that, and really you've saved people's lives, honestly.
There's about 30 people that I have helped get out of the penitentiary. And it started a little, I mean, I worked on my first defense case where I got up and testified for a criminal defendant in 1994 and got him acquitted because people they did all kinds of cheating in that particular fire. And I was invited to speak to groups of criminal defense attorneys, and I was in San Antonio for federal public defenders conference. And I get a call, and it's from Barry Scheck, who was the founder of the Innocence Project. And he says, why don't you meet me in a bar? And I said, sure. Because I knew who Barry was and admired his work, but I'd never met him. We had a drink in the bar, and he told me about these two Texas cases. One was Cameron Todd Willingham, and the other one was Ernest Ray Willis. And they had both been convicted of murder and sentenced to death based on BS, bad science. And Barry asked me if I would review the cases and write a report. And I said, you know, Barry, I'm not going to do this by myself. It's not going to be John Lentini against the great state of Texas. I said, I need some help. And if it's all right with you, we're going to put a committee together. And so I called up colleagues from the NFPA 921 committee, Dan Churchward, who was at the time the chairman of the committee, David Smith, who was a member of the committee and he was a past president of the IAAI, Doug Carpenter from Combustion Science and Engineering in Columbia, Maryland. So I had 3 other fire investigators, people that actually went out and got their hands dirty. And then I got a lawyer, a good friend of mine, Mike McKenzie, just to keep us out of legal trouble. And so we reviewed these cases, and it was all pro bono. We reviewed both cases and came to the conclusion that whatever it was they thought had indicated arson was not correct. It was low burning. It was pour patterns on the floor. The fire burned too fast. Neither of those cases had really credible evidence of arson. But one of the guys, Willis, when a new prosecutor, he got a new trial because, as sometimes happens, they cheated. Poor Mr. Willis, he was so freaked out by the fact that he's being accused of murder and in a death penalty case, they drugged him. They gave him Thorazine or some similar drug to keep him calm during the trial. And then in the closing argument, the prosecutor points at this guy and said, look at him just sitting there impassively, showing no emotion at all. Well, they drugged him. And so when a federal judge found out about the drugging, he said, you know what, Mr. Willis gets a new trial. And the prosecutor who looked at it, looked at the evidence. He saw a report by another fire investigator named Gerald Hurst. He read Gerald Hurst's report, and he said, you know what, I'm not going to try this guy again. He's innocent. And he let him out. Well, that same year, another guy,
which does not happen. I mean, that easily, usually, right?
It happens a few times. It just depends on whether the prosecutor is in it for getting convictions or he's in it for doing justice.
The truth, yeah.
And some prosecutors, there are good prosecutors out there. I mean, we need prosecutors. We just need ethical ones.
Right.
And there are plenty of them, but there's also I've met quite a few that are not. Right? They want to get their conviction at all costs.
Well, just real quick, in reference to the Willis case, what was the basic facts of that case and who ended up dying?
There were two women. These guys were young. They were partying. Two guys and two girls were in the house drinking, probably smoking pot. And, they just passed out and woke up to a fire, probably caused by a cigarette or something. And they flashed over one room, and Willis and his friend got out, but two women died, and so they were charged with arson based on low burns and poor patterns, and the samples were negative. There wasn't any finding of accelerant, but back in those days, it was perfectly common for people to say, "Well, I don't care if the laboratory's negative. I know what I saw with my eyeballs."
Mm-hmm.
The same thing happened. The same thing happened to Cameron Todd Willingham. Only nobody read Gerald Hurst's report about the Willingham fire, and Rick Perry, didn't want to give the guy a reprieve. He didn't read the report. I doubt whether anyone on his staff even read the report, but he just said, "No, he's a monster. He killed his little girls." And
what's the basic facts of the Willingham case? Because now, Willis, just to make sure I'm correct on this, he served 17 years on death row, and then
he did.
So he had to have been getting close. He got to be getting really close to the execution date, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I don't know how many execution dates he was given, but he lucked out by surviving that long. And Texas, despite the fact that they execute more people than anybody else, they have the best program for compensating people who have been wrongfully convicted. So Mr. Willis got, I think, like $80,000 initially, and then $80,000 a year, free tuition at state universities, and free health care.
Wow.
So yeah, well, 17 years on death row. There's no making that up.
No, and I'm telling you that I don't know of another state that's even got anything like that. So
there's a lot of states have them now. Most of the states have got some sort of compensation program. It's typical to top it out at $50,000 a year for every year served. They'll double it if you're on death row. Some states, they say, well, we'll give you the median income of a resident of our state, but it's better than nothing. And in the beginning, it was nothing. And when somebody's exonerated, they don't get the support that someone that gets out on parole gets. Someone that gets out on parole after serving, their sentence or most of their sentence, they get a parole officer, and that guy's going to keep checking on them. And there are resources available to them. People that have been exonerated, no parole officer, no nothing. They just give you $50 and kick you out.
Yeah, and with a mountain of debt and your reputation.
Oh yeah,
pretty much ruined.
You can't rent a house. You can't get a job. There's all kinds of things you can't do. Even if you've been exonerated. So,
yeah. If you're just joining us, this is John Lentini, fire fire investigator and fire debris expert. And have you testified in about almost every state in this country by now?
Pretty close. I've testified 200 times, more than 200 times, and I've been around. There's probably some states I haven't been to yet.
Yeah,
but I've been to a lot of them.
well, let's talk about the
in
willing.
Canada.
Oh, really? Is that a pretty big difference? I'm sure it is.
Well, the one thing, the reason they call it the witness stand is the witnesses in Canada actually stand.
Really?
Yeah. So you don't get to sit down. They may have changed since the last time I testified there, but when I testified there, it was standing.
Wow. I didn't know that. That could be very uncomfortable after a while. So the Willingham case, what are the basic facts of that specific case? Because between the two of these are really big cases I don't think you got in time for him, right? It was just
No, he was already dead when I heard about him.
right.
Okay. I'd like to think that if I had gotten the case like before he went to trial, I might have been able to help. But who knows? He woke up. His wife had gone out Christmas shopping. It was like December 23rd or very close to Christmas. They had 2 little girls, and one of the girls woke him up and said, "Daddy, Daddy, there's a fire." And he got up, and when he stood up, he was in the smoke, and his hair started singeing, and he couldn't get to the girls. They were in another room, and it looked like the fire started in their room. Who knows what caused it, because the fire investigators, they went in there and they said they saw burning on the floor, and they said this is arson. So they didn't bother to check the gas heater that was in that room. They didn't check any of the electrical appliances. And the guy that made the case, he said, well, the fact that the fire auto-ventilated, that means that the windows broke and it vented out the windows. He said, that's a sign of arson. And I was thinking, what? I never heard of that. But the jury was given like 20 different reasons that this fire marshal thought that it was an arson fire. And we went through and looked at every one of them, and none of them said that it was arson. But the guy, they said he was a Satan worshiper because he had a poster of Iron Maiden on the wall. And they said, he's a Satan worshiper. Well, he also had Led Zeppelin too, and they wrote Stairway to Heaven. So there was some really cool stuff. Willingham got a terrible lawyer who thought that Willingham had done it. He went and burned some carpet, and he said, "Oh yeah, that looks just like what I saw in the house," and he believed his client to be guilty. So Willingham didn't get a fair shake. But I can tell you that he has accomplished far more in death than he would ever have accomplished in life. And
explain that to me a little bit.
Well, he was sort of a wastrel. He was a unemployed mechanic who liked to play darts and drink beer and hang out with his buddies. And he was probably never going to amount to much. But his execution just galvanized both the fire investigation community and the death penalty community, which is kind of a shame. The death penalty, and I was more interested in the mythology of fire investigation or arson investigation that had put him in there, and I wanted to work on the science, and other people were working on the death penalty. But
yes,
we worked together.
That's good. And speaking of science, there's been tremendous advances in the world of forensics, no doubt, with respect to the sizes of samples that are necessary to just get DNA, for instance. And I've seen you talk about this previously. And one of the things that you talked about is how low do you go? And what do you mean by that? Just to kind of explain that to the listeners here.
Well, we are surrounded by petroleum products. The floor in my house is made out of vinyl. my shoes are put together with all kinds of organic chemicals. When you walk into a shoe store, that smell, that's hydrocarbons. So, when people they get their shoes seized and then the shoes get tested and people come back and say, oh, there's flammable liquid on the shoes. I say, of course there's flammable liquid on the shoes. They're made with flammable liquids. If you pick up a newspaper and hold it up to your face and take a deep breath, you'll probably smell the kerosene or the mineral spirits that the printer used to clean the press. There are all kinds, and bug sprays and furniture polish. We're surrounded by petroleum products. So what we want to find are the foreign petroleum products. We don't want to be finding background stuff. And back when I started, we never found background stuff. We had lots and lots of false negatives. Because if you couldn't smell the sample, if you couldn't smell the accelerant in a sample, chances are you weren't going to find anything. These days, the detection limit is somewhere around a drop. Take a drop of gasoline in a gallon of fire debris. I could find it back in 1974. Now, I can find a 500th of a drop without working up a sweat. And it's all because we've learned how to separate the volatile materials, separate the volatile organics from the fire debris in a much better way. Used to be we had to boil the evidence and then condense the steam. And if there was oil or something oily in there, it would float. The oil would float on the water. You could actually see it. But now we put a little carbon strip in the can, and it will pick up a 500th of a drop of gasoline or whatever accelerant happens to be there. So it's very, very sensitive. We just need to be careful because if you've got a hardwood floor, for example, it's been painted with polyurethane that was thinned with mineral spirits. That mineral spirits is still detectable 20 years later. And I did some of the work on that, on how persistent the solvents that floor coatings used in floor coatings, how persistent are those? How long will they last? And they will last indefinitely. So that's why you need to collect comparison samples. If you're going to take a sample of a hardwood floor that you think has accelerant on it, go into another room and get another sample that's not burned.
Yeah, that makes sounds like really good advice. And so you have written 2 books. Which the first book that you wrote was the book on fire investigation. Am I correct?
Right. That's a textbook. Scientific Protocols for Fire Investigation. That is a picture of the Lime Street fire on the cover. I set that fire.
So what is this book? What does the investigator get from this book? What
everything you need? Everything you need in that book. I offer a 3-day course where I teach the book basically. It starts out with a history of science and fire and how they are intertwined. And then I talk about chemistry. You got to know chemistry if you're going to do fire investigation. I'm sorry, if you don't like chemistry, maybe you should find another line of work or be a detective. Just don't be a fire investigator if you don't like chemistry, because what's going on is a chemical reaction. And in the 3rd chapter, I talk about fire dynamics, which is how a fire behaves inside a structure. I don't know a lot about wildfires, but I do know about structure fires. So this is mainly for structure fire investigation. Then I talk about, procedures, and I talk about different appliances. I got a chapter on how to do the laboratory work that I recommend people read the first couple of pages because it gets real technical as you get into it. And then I talk about appliances, and then I start telling stories. Talk about, here's a fire scene that I investigated, and this may include like mini fire investigation reports. And there's a chapter on the myths, on the mythology. It's another chapter on fire investigations gone bad. And then finally, there's a chapter about how to be an expert witness. And so it's a textbook, and it's for somebody that wants to be a professional fire investigator or someone who wants to cross-examine a fire investigator, or, you know, if you're in the insurance business. But it's a textbook. It's for professionals. And people tell me that it's accessible, but you got to have a little bit of science background. The second book is my case study book that just came out this year. It's called Twice Burned. There you go. First you get burned by the fire, and then you get burned by the justice system. And it's got a lot of stories in there about fire investigators that just made a call. They said it was arson, and in every case it's not. The stories in this book anyways. They were cases that somebody said it was an arson, but it wasn't really arson.
I think we've got a video that I want to have Amanda show you as soon as she loads it up. Throw it up there, Amanda, about that book specifically.
He started his career catching arsonists. Then he discovered the system was convicting innocent people. In Twice Burned, renowned fire scientist John Lentini shares the real cases that exposed junk fire science, overturned wrongful convictions, and transformed modern fire investigation. A true crime journey through burned crime scenes, false assumptions, and a justice system reluctant to admit mistakes. The Fire tells the truth if you know how to read it. Available now on Amazon.
You know, John, there's a scene in that video clip there, and it's like a building that looks like it exploded. You know what I'm talking about? It's got the metal,
Yeah.
All right. I saw that on an episode of something. I don't know if it was Dateline, if it was
Forensic Files.
Okay.
It was
Yes,
on the
that's
Forensic
right.
Files.
What's that case about?
This is a guy that came home. He and his wife came home. They had, it was a cold night in Georgia, and this guy used a smudge pot to warm up this place. It was used to be an airplane hangar that had an apartment off to the side. And he went into that hangar and he was going to refuel his smudge pot because it had run out. And the wife said it exploded. Well, we found out why it exploded. He was not only refueling a hot heater, he was refueling a heater designed to burn kerosene with gasoline. And it just blew up. There was a guy who didn't know what he was doing. He was a corrupt cop. And I hate to say that, but he testified that he had worked on 25 arson homicides in his career. And unfortunately for him, we were able to go check the state fire marshal's records. And there had only been one arson case that was thought to be a homicide in his jurisdiction in his career. And it was the case we were litigating. So he lied about his experience. He had no knowledge. He looked at some spalling on the floor. He called it spalding. He didn't even know the correct terminology. And in any profession, the first thing you learn is the terminology. This guy didn't even know that. It was a terrible, terrible case. It should not have come to trial. The state fire marshal was there watching me testify, but he didn't testify himself. His own people had called the thing undetermined, but he was being a trooper and helping the team. So he was there, you know, feeding the prosecutor questions to ask me on cross. Jury was on; they were out half an hour or so. But the Chicago Tribune was covering the trial because the guy who had investigated the Willingham case, he saw my name. He called me up and asked me about arson, and you know, particularly where bad science was being used. And I said, well, I got a trial that's happening right now. You should come watch it. And he did. And he said, well, let's go out to the fire scene. And I said, Maurice, I never go to fire scenes in my suit. I said, this is silly. So we staged those pictures there showing me in a white shirt in a fire scene. I've never, ever gone to a fire scene in a suit because I would ruin it.
Yeah, of course. Now, is there anything with a body as far as the way they turn? Do they turn towards the source of the flame? I think I've heard that from somewhere.
The only thing that happens that's really predictable is that the muscles contract. So you get the fingers will do this. They'll make a fist, and the muscles will contract, and you'll end up looking like this. And it's called the pugilistic posture. And it's just because the heat on the muscles causes you to assume that position. It means nothing. But for a lot of years, people thought, oh, they were trying to fight off the fire, or they're trying to fight off an assailant. It's just a typical response of a dead body to a fire.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that training.
Underneath this body, this guy is where he saw the spalling, right, that he called spalding.
Okay. Yeah, I think in that particular case, if I remember correctly, and it's been several years since I've seen that episode, or it's been a few years at least, but I remember in there, and I think that the investigator was still like, "Yep, I still stand by my decision," and yada yada yada.
Oh yeah, it's very. Think about it. If somebody is telling you you have made up a fire as an arson here, and you have sent someone to prison, you don't want to admit that. So denial is the easiest thing.
Yeah, of course. So, what do you run across that a lot? I mean, is it like a full-time gig for you to go across the country? And I mean, are you running across stuff? Well, what I'm getting at is, do you run across a bunch of these? And I know that there's some exceptionally good arson investigators out there. There's no doubt about it. But do you run across a lot that you're just kind of shaking your head going, what's going on here?
Only occasionally now. It used to be pretty common, because people would rely on low burns or poor patterns. And NFPA 921 has cleaned up the act of the fire investigation profession tremendously. Now, when it first came out, a book called NFPA 921, Guide for Fire and Explosion Investigations. When it first came out, fire investigators hated it. They were screaming bloody murder. How dare these people tell me how to do my job? But eventually, the fire investigation profession, as exemplified by the International Association of Arson Investigators. I remember being in a meeting with the president of the IAAI, and he said, it's time for fire investigators to start looking out the windshield and stop looking in the rearview mirror. And they got on board in 2000, 2001 with NFPA 921. Prior to that, they thought, it was the devil's tool, just to help bad guys get off. And then, eventually people learn. So things are way better than they used to be. But I still run across them. I mean, I had one in 2022 where, some bad information was given to the fire investigator, and he was on the body-worn camera saying it was a cigarette fire, but he got some bad information from the medical examiner and said, no, it's an arson fire. And we went to trial. I couldn't believe it, that we had to go to trial, but we did. And the defendant was acquitted. And the fire investigator was mad at me. I tried to make nice. I sent him a book, autographed the book, and said, here, this is to help you guys avoid making mistakes in the future. And he wrote me back an ugly letter. So.
Well, I'll tell you. So you do teach. Do you still teach, or you're not? Yeah, you're not retired. You're still in business.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do if I retired. Well, I am taking off for the next 3 weeks on a Canadian vacation. But I am teaching a course at Cedar Crest College in Allentown, Pennsylvania, September 22nd through the 24th, and going to go through the book. I've taught the course I think 15 times now, and it's always been well received, and people enjoy it.
Oh, I'm sure you're entertaining.
Come away thinking about fire in a different way. I like to say, it'll change the way you think about fires, and it'll definitely improve it, because you will be thinking about ventilation. You'll be thinking about oxygen and how it combines, and how we're really looking at a chemical reaction.
Now, do you do any case studies as far as speaking to like homicide organizations and stuff like that, or just different groups that are forensic organizations, etc.?
I used to give a presentation every year at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. I do speaking whenever people invite me,
Yeah,
like tonight.
and I appreciate it. I really do. I know your time is incredibly valuable. I appreciate you coming on here and telling us these stories, because I think it's important for people. And by the way, you've said it many times on other podcasts and stuff. You've also found a lot of people that are guilty that have been.
Hell yes. Listen,
Lots of people.
lots of people. Defense lawyers' job is to get their guy a fair trial, get the defendant a fair trial, and I can help them get their client a fair trial. But most of the time I say, I'm not testifying for this guy because he's guilty as hell. You should make the best deal you can, and that happens. Three out of four times when a defense lawyer calls me up, and I'll look at the evidence. I say, yeah, there's nothing I can do to help your client, but here's what you can do for cross-examination. Here are some avenues that you can explore so that you can avoid being ineffective.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I'm gonna throw up a few questions before we get off of here, because the people that are hanging out and watching, I appreciate the fact that they're still hanging. I mean, you're a fascinating guy. I could talk to you for days, no doubt. I would carry your suitcase
Give me a
to
break.
go watch you investigate some of this stuff. It's just amazing how much. I mean, and you still don't know it all. It's so.
Oh, no. Well,
you don't
that's
even.
the thing. That's the thing. Every time I watch a test fire, I learn something. So I'm still learning.
Yeah, Amanda, throw some questions up, since there's some people. Throw some good ones up there for them to dive into if you've got them handy. But basically, you still get called to testify. You're willing to do that. All right, here's one. Do most of the people that commit arson get caught?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
not.
Ed Nordskog came on. They Ed Nordskog?
I do.
Yeah. He's been on here before. Long time ago.
He's
talking.
not a fan.
Oh, okay. All right. But I'll tell you what you're bringing to the table. Well, you asked. Well, of course you get called to testify. Of course, still probably regularly.
Yeah. Well, I just had an incredible month because Arizona just passed a compensation law this year for people that have been wrongly incarcerated, and I had 3 Arizona cases going back as far as 1991, where they're all applying for the compensation now. And I ended up having to write three new reports on each case.
Let's see. Throw up another question. That wasn't Chris Hansen. That's somebody else. It sounded like Chris Hansen. Let's see. What's Toby got?
Oh, he's asking about cinder block house. Cinder block houses, they're just as dangerous as stick houses. It's just that the cinder block walls will stay up. What does the damage in a house fire is not the structure, it's the contents. It's your polyurethane filled sofa that is
Yeah, I
like
heard you say
solid
something
gasoline.
I heard you something about like a couch. Couches are bad.
Couches are, if you've got a couch on fire, get your family out of the house and call the fire department. Do not try and fight that thing. You can't do it.
Huh. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff they need to be telling you when you're growing up.
Well,
they just don't.
The one thing they tell you is get down on the floor, and that's a good thing because that's where the fresh air is. But late in a fire, that's the only place where there's any fresh air, so that's why the floors burn. And we used to tell people, oh, you got a low burning, you got your floors burned. Somebody must have poured gasoline on it. And there were a lot of cases made that way, just on low burning, because everybody knows fire burns up. Well, it only burns up until it gets to the ceiling, and then it starts filling up the room and coming down, filling up the room with this hot smoke, and eventually it goes to flashover.
So your advice to somebody that's wanting to maybe be an arson investigator, probably have some sort of a chemistry type background, would be a good start.
That would be a great start.
Yeah.
The first thing you got to do is keep your mind right. You don't want to be an arson investigator. You want to be a fire investigator.
Oh.
If you're just an arson investigator, you're gonna make mistakes. You need to see the full range of what happens during fires.
For some reason, I think you might have been involved in another case that I saw on TV as well. And if you weren't, forgive me. I didn't research everything you've ever done, but it had something to do with a car fire where a lady burned up in a car and there was drip patterns. Does that ring a bell to you? You know the case that I'm talking about? Was that yours?
Oh wait, there was one in Georgia.
That sounds right.
Yeah. I know that case. It was investigated by a colleague who got it wrong.
Okay.
Lady drove off the road and hit a tree.
That was it. I just lost your audio. We just lost his audio real quick. Can you hear me? Yeah, we lost your audio somehow. I don't know what happened. You might have to click that red button down below and then come back right back in on the link. I don't know why that happened. But if there's any other questions, ladies and gentlemen, this is the time, because we're about ready to come to a close. And I don't know what happened on that, because it shows he has audio. Amanda, come to the rescue. I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what you're thinking right now while he's trying to get his audio back. Did I tell you an expert? This guy is an expert, and he's something else, and he's very, very knowledgeable when it comes to fire. I don't expect that, the general run-of-the-mill citizen is going to be running out to get this book, but I will tell you this, that if you are a forensics investigator or you're somebody in the world of maybe crime scene, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to have some overall knowledge as to, how to educate yourself to know a little bit more about fire investigation and fire debris and things like that. I mean, when I worked in the crime scene, when I worked as a crime scene detective, I don't remember a whole heck of a lot of, here, let me show you how to do this with respect to this when it came to fire stuff. So it's kind of like, it's stuff that we need to really learn a lot more about and so forth. Chris is going to call him. Chris from Syracuse is going to call him and find out what in the heck happened to our sound. But ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, this is the time to throw it up there on the screen. If we see a really good one, we'll throw it out there. I want to thank everybody for being here, though, in the meantime. Joel Treadwell, how you doing? Where are you from? Remind me. Toby, where are you from? I want to know where you're from as well. And some of the others that I'm seeing some names that I just don't recognize. And if I've seen you in here before, I appreciate it. Then I'm sorry. The Christmas tree fire. Yeah, I've heard they're bad. How fast a dried tree? Yep, they go up quick. Okay, we get you back. I see your lips moving, and I see you say I'm back. But let's see who else is in the house. Hello from Indiana, Christy Rhodes. Welcome. Appreciate you being here. Nancy Smith, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Holly Riley, appreciate you. And golly, there's so many great names in here. I'm loving this. Gunny J, where are you from? I don't remember seeing you in here. So that's good. I want to see a lot of different people. I will tell you this, just while we're trying to get him back, I'll just tell you he's on the phone. He's trying to figure it out. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I'm sure that he would, he's interested in the truth, and that's what I really appreciate about him. And I really, Ada's in the house. Cindy RN retired from Ada. Welcome. Appreciate you being here. Did we get you back? Nope, not yet. He's still not back. What in the heck happened to it? He might have to just click out and then hit the link one more time. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, we had a meeting today, and we had a meeting about bettering this and making this a lot better. Not just this show, but an umbrella of other shows that Joel's from Georgia. Where in Georgia? I'd like to know. But I like Georgia. I know Summer Benton from there. And so, and some other great people too. Cheryl McCollum, she's out there as well. But New Mexico, Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. I've actually been there. I've swam in the Rio Grande River there in Truth or Consequences, Toby. I've actually been there many, many years ago. And thank you for whoever said that I was really amazing. I love that. And I appreciate any kind of comments you have. What a great show. Next week, I'll just tell you, I'll give you a preview of what's coming next week. We're going to have a guest that, that sounds good. That sounds encouraging. Now I see two of them at the bottom of the screen. Hopefully one of them works. Let's see here. Next week, real quick, Danny was stranded in Montana last night, and he was stressed out to the max. And if forensic science is your dream job, then go for it. Catherine Avery, Catherine Severns Avery is going to be our guest next week. She's going to be awesome, and she's from up in Colorado, and her story is pretty extraordinary, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. And so, but if you're in law enforcement, if you're somebody that's wanting to get into this industry, if you're in the fire industry and you're wanting to get into the fire investigation world, then I highly recommend that you get those books. And it sounds like really good reading, actually. Might be something that I'm going to have to grab a copy of and take a look at for sure. Excellent. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. Sorry that we had a little bit of a technical difficulty. And the science, there's a lot of science behind it and so forth. And I'm trying to read along. Thanks to everybody for being in here tonight. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully you got a little bit. I can tell you this, Amanda, throw his website up. His website is something that you can tune into, and he's got a lot of content. Are you there now?
Hello. Can you see
Oh,
me?
yes, he's alive.
Yeah, but
He's
can you hear
alive.
me?
I can hear you. I
All
can hear
right.
you. All right. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate your you joining us back. So what is your website? Let's talk about your that's it right there. It's the forensicfireinstitute.com.
No,
Right?
no, don't
No.
go there. No.
Okay.
I-
Where should we go?
Fire scientist.
Okay, fire
F-I-
scientist.
FIRESCIENTIST.com.
Okay, firescientist.com. And if people want to reach out and inquire about maybe having you put on a class, that's something that I'm sure you'd be able to come up with something, and you guys could maybe get together on that. There you go. So check that out if you're looking to reach out to him if you have questions. And I'm sure that if you're an attorney out there and maybe you're looking for somebody that can look at a case, will you originally look at do they ask you to look at cases all the time? I'm sure. Both
Yes,
sides.
but I don't go to fire scenes anymore. I've shoveled out 2,000 of them, and I'm old. So I try to avoid going to fire scenes. My work is reviewing reports and testimony and photographs.
Okay. Yeah, and there's a lot to be. I'm sure you see a lot in the photographs that you can basically, you don't have to necessarily go to the scene. And once you get the lab reports and stuff like that and see how things were written, man, what a cool job you've had. What a lengthy career, and obviously you loved it, or you wouldn't have done it for over 45 years.
Yeah,
So
I have not been bored since I started this work in 1974.
incredible. And how many more years do you think you're going to do it until you just say that? I know you want to keep busy, but is there a time when your wife's like, that's enough, I'm sick of it, let's just travel?
Some of these cases last 5 years, I'm 74 now. So
Yeah, man. Hey, listen, John, I can't thank you enough. I don't want you to click off. I want you to hang out just briefly, and we're going to talk off air. Ladies and gentlemen, he's an expert, and I'm honored that he came on here on our show, and I hope you got a lot out of it, because I know I did. And I definitely, I can already tell by looking at myself on the screen, I'm smarter than I was then when we started. So thank you, John. I appreciate it. For those of you that are and it's my pleasure, really. It's glad to know somebody like you, that if I ever came across something and I needed to, somebody asked me, hey, do you know anybody that knows this? You're definitely one of those people that I would recommend that they call. Check out his books. Check out his books if you're in the world of investigation, forensics, you're a forensic scientist, all of that stuff. I know 2000, it's crazy. That's a lot of scenes. It's a lot of scenes. Then check it out. Check out his website, see what he's got to offer on there. And man, what a pleasure. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, I'll tell you what, this show is not a show without you. And I just briefly talked about this, and then we'll get off here. we're looking at different ways. I'll probably we're going to make some changes coming up in the very near future, and we're going to make it a little bit better. We're going to come out with a little bit of swag. Maybe we may even give some of that away. We'll see what happens, but we're going to be coming out with some cool stuff in the very near future. Thanks to Chris DePerno and Amanda behind the curtain, and we're going to make this a lot better. And I briefly talked about an umbrella of other shows that I'm going to introduce you to because I think that they deserve some attention too. And so, good evening to everybody. Good evening to you. Thank you, Nancy and Toby and everybody else, and Danny. Thank you for being here. Until next week, take us out, Amanda.